So if you've been wondering when the end of this series was going to be, and I kept saying not yet, I think we've finally got to the now part of the end of this series. But for quite a while now, I've been talking about the kingdom of God and talking about the now and not yet kingdom. We've been looking at that in all sorts of different ways. And last week we looked at what that means for power and prayer. And I said that what we've got to remember most of all about this kingdom is that it is to do with the King, Jesus. And one of the phrases I used at the very end of my prayer last week was talking about Jesus as the humble King. And so I want to look at that a little bit today. If you want to follow along in a Bible, we will be looking at John 13. This idea of, a kingdom that was coming and a king was, an expectation that the Jewish nation had had for a long time, certainly since they, asked for a king to be like all the nations around them, and they got Saul, and that didn't work out too well, so they got David, and then, things went well and badly and well and badly and well and badly as you went through whether they had good or bad kings, but they longed for a kingdom. And they had an expectation of this kingdom, and I think that their expectation of this kingdom was that it would be one where, Rome or Greece or whoever was oppressing them would be overthrown and they would be in the ascendancy. And I think their expectation, not just that they would then be this powerful ruling nation, but that the king of that kingdom would be, a powerful, imposing ruler. And so I'm pretty sure that their expectation of this coming king was not reflected in the one who came and served. And in John 13, we read the story of him washing the disciples' feet. And that was shocking at the time. Perhaps not so much now because we're familiar with that as a story, but a king acting like a servant. And not just, dressing up like a servant and, acting like a servant for some, strange reason. Actually serving was really foreign to their expectations. So much so that in some of the very earliest sermons of the church, this was around 400 AD, so a long, long time ago. Guy who was a bishop in Syria had this in one of his sermons: "He who wraps the heavens in clouds wrapped around himself a towel. He who pours the waters into the rivers and the pools tipped water into a basin. And he before whom every knee bends in heaven and on earth knelt to wash the feet of his disciples." This certainly is an upside-down kingdom, as I had said a few weeks ago. If we read what it says here in John, we find that this king who'd come from glory and will soon be returning to glory stepped down into this human world, as I like to say, stepped into this fallen human existence of ours. And while he was here, he didn't just come in triumph and act as he could have as the ruler and demanding our allegiance. He came to serve and to save. It was a very, menial and lowly act to wash someone's feet. You might remember John the Baptist saying when Jesus came and asked to be baptized by John, he said, "You've got to be kidding. I'm not even worthy to, untie your sandals. I'm lower than even the lowest servant who would do that, and you want me to baptize you." This was, a very menial and very, humbling and lowering yourself to do act. And yet we read this: "Having loved his own who are in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love." The evening meal was being served. And the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. But Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. As I just said, And so because of this, he got up from the meal. He took off his outer clothing and wrapped it as a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Yet when he got to Simon Peter, he was so affronted that Jesus, the leader of the group, would do something. He acts quite violently and says, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand." But he certainly didn't understand then. "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." And it wasn't so much that Peter objected to having his feet washed. I mean, if Nathaniel or, Bartholomew or Thomas or one of the others had maybe come to start washing his feet, he might have thought that was a bit weird, but he would have perhaps let them do it. And if a servant had come to wash his feet, he might not have been at all worried. But it was Jesus. The leader of the group was deigning to wash Peter's feet. And he says, "No, you shall never wash my feet." But Jesus replied, "If I do not wash you..." It's interesting, it's not just the being washed, but it's the who is doing the washing that's important. Beyond this example of servanthood, there's a picture of the spiritual work that will soon be done in the place of Jesus' death and resurrection. "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." And so then as we read Peter fairly impetuous saying, "Well, in that case, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well," which is kind of typical of Peter. But Jesus answers, said, "No, a person who's had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean." It is kind of interesting. Why is he washing their feet? And why is it just the feet? The meal was being served. Jesus got up in the middle of it. And we might think, they'd go and wash their hands. That makes sense. Wash your hands before eating, to get rid of the germs or something. But why their feet? Well, I think it reveals something of the reason that Jesus had come. To show them the love. He wanted to show and demonstrate in this, acted out parable, perhaps, that he was there to serve them and serve them in a special and a specific way. I mean, the disciples, and Judas especially, who gets some mentions here, really seem to have wanted and expected perhaps Jesus would come in power to overthrow the current corrupt leaders and overthrow the Roman oppressors. But the Son of Man has come to save, but he's come to save by serving. He's not come to rule, but he's come to redeem. He's not come to conquer, but he's come to cleanse. And so in what's going to take place in the next few days with the crucifixion and the resurrection, where it's not so much water but blood that cleanses, that cleanses all. And yet he still says this strange thing: a person who's had a bath needs only to wash his feet. You might have remembered a few weeks ago when I talked about the being made holy, the being sanctified, the now and the not yet. What does that mean? That in a way, when we've come to Jesus, we have been washed clean, yet we're not yet pure. We're not yet completely righteous. We come and we continually, express to Jesus our need to have those things that sully us cleansed and taken away. In the Lord's Prayer, you might know that we're encouraged to come each day and pray, "Lord, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us." Or if you've learnt that in the older language, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." A word that actually has the meaning to have walked wrongly, to do with our feet. There's a great definition of sin. It's something that takes you where you shouldn't go and keeps you there longer than you ought to stay. And so while, yes, we're being cleansed and washed because of what Jesus has done, symbolised in our baptism, there is still a need for us to come and have those things washed away that continue to sully us in different ways. And the promise for us here is that Jesus longs and desires to do that. But beyond just that spiritual symbolism of our trespasses being washed away, it's the act of serving, this humility that Jesus shows, that he reveals himself to be, unlike so many kings, to be the humble king. A very odd pair of words to put together, and it is intriguing. We might look at that and think that's quite a lovely description of a king or of a person, but for the culture this was written to, that would have been completely ridiculous. The cultures at that time were very much cultures of honour and shame. You were either honoured or you were ashamed. And the idea of humility, that you would humble yourself rather than seeking and hanging on to honour, was completely foreign, especially for anyone in a position of greatness or leadership. You would not describe a king or ruler in those days as humble. There's a great book by John Dixon on how the whole modern understanding of humility is shaped completely by the person of Jesus and this act that he has done in the reading for today. Because back then, a few thousand years ago, biographies and autobiographies of rulers, we'd get pretty turned off when we read them. It would always simply be, I'm the greatest, I'm the best, this is what I've done, I'm terrific, I'm wonderful. It wouldn't sort of talk about a humble beginning. If that was true, you'd leave that bit of the story out because you'd be ashamed of that completely. Because that was the kind of thing expected of a great ruler. You'd never expect them to take a towel and kneel at the feet of their followers and wash the dirt and dust from their feet. But Jesus shows himself here to be that humble king. And he's not compelled to do this in any way like a slave or a servant would be compelled to. He is the king who has chosen to do this. When I was thinking about this some years ago, I remembered some places that I'd travelled to and been where they had an expectation that, you were entering a holy place, and so, you would leave you'd take your shoes off, because you wouldn't want to bring the dirt from your shoes, into that place, and so you'd walk in that way. We might even go to some homes where we do that. We might do that out of politeness. We don't want to wreck their carpet, but sometimes you might go somewhere and get that idea that you're not good enough to enter until you've changed somehow. And that's the religious idea, that we're not good enough to enter, and so we've got to change, or we've got to leave our dirt behind. But the difference between Christ and others is not that there's an expectation of coming to a holy place, so take off your feet, but we're coming to a holy place, so I will wash your feet, that you are clean to enter. The difference is that the God, the holy, the sacred, approaches us and washes our feet, not that we have to leave something apart to come into the presence of the holy and sacred. He has come to us. And he encourages us as his followers to copy his example. Paul, writing to the Philippians, says this: do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped, something to be held on to, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself. In this now and not yet kingdom, in this upside down kingdom, in the kingdom of the humble king, we as the citizens and followers of this king are to look not to our own interests, but to the interests of others, which has a complete twist on what we would expect of leadership. That it's not about leading from some position of power or privilege. Jesus certainly had power. We saw that in the miracles that he has done. He has the position, the right hand of God. But he doesn't demand or expect the allegiance that we would owe him in some dictatorial way, because he leads completely differently. Not from position, power, or privilege, but he leads out of a purpose. And his purpose, bizarrely, seems at this stage to serve us. I lost it here. I think I had it on the first little page of my notes, but they added something to the coronation ceremony this time around. The very beginning of it was very moving, where Charles came to the entrance of the cathedral, and there were a group of children, and I can probably do it here, can't I? Because what I do here doesn't go back to the screen. I can find the notes here. Or maybe I can't. But they had the children speaking, and the reply was, I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve. I'll try and look that up and put it on an e-news later on, because it really impressed me when I heard that at the time, and thinking about it now. And that is because that whole idea of coronation and so on is one where they want to say we recognise Jesus as king, and their position is somehow under that. Now, that's been abused so many times and in so many ways. But the idea that the king would come and the purpose was not to rule it over us, but to serve, is so bizarre. Perhaps we need to get an idea of that in the way we talk about leadership and view leadership. That leadership isn't a position, a seat, a place that you get or stand in. Leadership is a function. Leadership is something you do. And the leadership in this kingdom is servant leadership. I mean, we see the disciples arguing in Luke. We looked at this, I think, in one of the sermons a while ago. And they were arguing about, who was going to be the greatest. A dispute rose as to which one would be the greatest. And Jesus said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority call themselves benefactors, but you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. For who's greater? The one who is at the table or the one who serves? In our world, isn't it the one who's at the table? But I am among you as the one who serves. They weren't arguing about who was the greatest, fighting to see who was going to grab the bowl and the towel and wash each other's feet. That was not what they were fighting over. Yet the greatest among them, what did he do? He took a towel and he took a bowl. In life, in church life especially, it's important for us to understand that leadership isn't a place, it's not some stationary thing, it's a function, it's an act. And as we follow Jesus, it's an act of serving, a servant heart. To continue in this chapter of John, Jesus, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. He said, "Do you understand what I've done for you?" He asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that's what I am. But now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. For I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. But now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. And we can look at this now and understand that Jesus showed himself in a way to be greater than his disciples by being willing to humble himself, to wash their feet. But that's only, as I said, because we've had 2,000 years of what Christ's done, twisting and changing the shame and honour culture that was so pervasive in the world, to one where we understand, even people with no connection with Christianity understand that to serve someone is a good thing and humility is a good thing. Sadly, not all think that, but we've come to learn. And it starts with what Jesus has done. And you know, being a servant is so much more than just the action that we would do. It's the attitude with which we do it. You can do the action but have the wrong heart. But if you've got the heart, you will actually do the action. They will come together. Sometimes it can be an affront to us to serve, especially in a society where, you know, we're told about the, you know, the rights we might want to have or demand, or, you know, we're paying for it, etc. There's a, you know, great story about Keith Green, who was a famous Christian musician back in the 80s, and he was travelling with a guy named Winky Pratney who thought that Keith was just getting a bit arrogant. And in some of the hotels and motels made him, you know, make his bed and tidy things up, and he'd say, but there's a maid to come and do that. But sort of say, maybe just humble yourself to do something that you might have otherwise thought was beneath you. You might remember, you know, the song, you know, brother, sister, let me serve you. You can serve in so many ways, as cleaner, cook, or captain. And we might hold some of those positions as more important than others in our way of thinking. But if we look and think that what's important is an attitude and a heart of serving, then each of them serve in their own ways, and none is better or of more value than another. It's not the position that makes you great, it's the orientation of your heart. Basically what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, I can do all these wonderful, great things, but if I have not love, then I am just a clanging gong. The action of serving is important, but the action without love is somewhat hollow and empty. There's a greatness that comes through humility, and that greatness is not in us exalting ourselves, but in, as we read here in James, draw near to God and he'll draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. I think it's an odd way of just talking about, you know, try and get a perspective that's a bit different than the world would have. And humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. You know, I like this. I was sharing with the friends that were visiting us during the week that this was going to be my theme, and Claire shared a quote that she'd come across, which I thought was a great one. Humility is the willingness to be known for who you really are. And humility isn't, you know, we talk about false humility, isn't some, you know, going around and being, you know, self-denigrating all the time and having no self-esteem, but it's not having an esteem that places you as better than or higher than or different from others. And it ties in with integrity here. Integrity, making sure that you are in public the same person that you are in private. And humility is the willingness to be known for who you really are. And Jesus is willing to be known for who you really are. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so I am. Yet I'm also here to serve. Peter obviously did learn something from what Jesus did. In the letters that he wrote later in the New Testament, he says this: care for the flock of God that's entrusted to you. Watch over it willingly, not grudgingly, not for what you'll get out of it, but because you're eager to serve God. Don't lord it over people assigned to your care, but lead them by your good example. And when the head shepherd comes, your reward will be never-ending share in his glory and honour. You younger men accept the authority of elders, and all of you serve each other in humility, for God sets himself against the proud, but he shows favour to the humble. So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, and in his good time he will honour you. As I said, we can expect that a supreme God would somehow be at the top of a chain of command. And yes, God is at the top, God is at the summit, but in Jesus we see he's also placed himself at the foot. Here literally at the feet of his followers, washing them, cleansing them and serving them. In a way, God is above all and beneath all, encompassing our lives in his love and in his grace. Just the way this chapter started. Having loved his own who are in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. And not long after this had happened, Jesus speaks to his disciples again and says this, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you." We've just read what he was going to do to show them the full extent of his love by humbling himself to serve them. Love one another as I have loved you, that we might humble ourselves to serve. And by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. The followers of other kings might try to be like those kings. The followers of some other famous celebrities and people and politicians around the world might act and talk and try and be like them. But if we want to be known and seen as followers of Jesus, we will act like him. We will love one another. And so in this we've seen Jesus, the King of this now and not yet kingdom, revealed as loving, humble, and forgiving. There's a song that came across quite a number of years ago that I really like. It's called The Humble King, and it has some great lyrics. It says, "You are the God of the broken, the friend of the weak. You wash the feet of the weary, you embrace the ones in need. And I want to be like you, Jesus, to have this heart in me. You are the God of the humble. You are the humble King." I'm going to play that song now and ask that as it plays that you'd pray as I will pray, that this won't just be a reminder of God's sanctification of us as he washes our feet, but a call for us to embrace his servant love, and that we might pray and ask, whose feet can we wash?
The feet of the weak. wash the feet of the weary, embrace the ones in need. And I want to be like you, Jesus, to have this heart in me. You are the God of the humble. You are the humble King. Yes, you are the God of the humble. You are the humble King.
So if there's some here who feel broken, some who feel weak, those that are weary, those that are in need, as Michael said, come, find him, find me. We'll pray. But know that Jesus, the God, the King, the humble King, is the God of the broken and the friend of the weak. He washes the feet of the weary. He embraces you in your need. Let me pray. Lord, might it be true of us that we would be able to sing and mean these words, and I want to be like you, Jesus. To have this heart in me, because you are the God of the humble, you are the humble King. Lord, speak to us as we go from this place today of ways that we might serve, ways which we might show love to one another in the family of the church, and beyond that, as people would look, they would see. That we live now in your kingdom that's not yet fully realised, but this kingdom that is so different from the rulers, the authorities and the powers of this world. That they would know that we are Christians by our love, that they would see that you are not a God of power, of privilege and position, but a God who came with a purpose to show us your love and to show us your